Hi, I'm Doug Atkinson here at Solutions Review, and we couldn't be happier to host the 4th Annual Insight Jam. I want to thank everyone who's participating this week, as well as our Insight Jam sponsors, DataStax, Monte Carlo, Denodo, High Gear, and Seller Data. I also want to thank our Solutions Review editors and staff for pulling this event together. When we started this in 2019, we wanted to take a moment at the end of the year to celebrate enterprise technology with a social media event offering best practices and predictions. This will be our biggest jam ever, including 16 live-streamed expert panel discussions over 4 days. And we intend to keep the insights flowing in 2023 with the launch of an expert subscription site for any tech professional who wants to publish posts on Solutions Review. Again, thank you all for being here and enjoy the Insight Jam.
Solutions Review presents Insight Jam, a social media celebration of enterprise technology.
Hello and welcome back to the 4th Annual Insight Jam. My name is Jonathan Paula, the Director of Multimedia here at Solutions Review. Today is Work Tech Wednesday, and we're wrapping up with our 4th and final panel of the day, how to build a process automation tech stack. I am joined by another group of expert speakers on the topic. Vaughn Thurman, welcome back from High Gear. Glad to have you moderating this session. Before we get into the discussion at hand, though, we're going to air a quick ad from High Gear and thank them for being a diamond level sponsor of this panel. Great spot. Love it. Thank you again, one and all, for joining me for this next hour as we discuss this topic. Vaughn, you've agreed to moderate, so I'll let you get started with the introductions. 60 seconds or so, tell the audience a bit about who you are and what your work experience is. And good luck.
You betcha. So even though I only look 30, I've been in the tech game for about 30 years. 20 of it now I've been helping typically mid-sized, but mainly enterprise organizations solve process problems. We've been focused on the workflow space, and process specifically is the fastest growing area within that. Excited today to talk to this great team and serve the organization and audience out there by filling in on this topic. Charlotte?
Hey, everybody. So I'm Charlotte Adams. I'm the VP of People at BonitaSoft. And I've been working at BonitaSoft for a little over 7 years now, and we develop and sell a BPM-based process automation platform. And I've worked in HR for over 15 years, always in tech companies. And a significant portion of my career has been in implementing HR, specifically HR processes. So as you can tell, I'm not here to talk about the technical aspects, but more about from a business user point of view.
Connor?
Hello, everybody. My name is Connor, and I'm the Vice President of Product and Engineering at a company called Content Stack. And we're a composable DXP, including a headless CMS. We work in what's called the mock architecture, the composable architecture, meaning companies assemble the best in breed technologies, whether it's e-commerce or personalization or CMS, to basically deliver experiences to customers. And because of the requirement that all of these platforms talk well with each other and that the business processes flow through them, we've also developed a product called Automation Hub, which you can use in a low-code fashion to automate a lot of these processes. So really excited to have the conversation today.
Bernd?
Yeah, my name is Bernd Rücker. I'm co-founder and chief technologist of Camunda. We're a process orchestration platform, what we are providing. And basically my personal background is really software engineering, software architecture. And like 15 or 20 years ago, I basically did development in a lot of like automating core processes from the software side of things. And I was always very interested in like how the connection, how that crossing works with software engineering and process automation on the other side. And back then, like 15 years ago, that for me meant to swim against the tide of these very often low-codey business process management suites back then at that time, which paid off very well. So we founded Camunda 14 years ago, and basically what we provide is a very, very different kind of tooling, which is more on the pro-code side, probably looking a little bit in the low-code domain, and we're very successful with that. So that's kind of still what I do. I discuss a lot of why pro-code, when pro-code, and these kind of things, and
Awesome.
What's the difference to low-code. Looking forward to that today.
Yep, great to have you here today. Matthew?
Hi, my name is Matt Agnew. I'm the Director of Product Marketing at Blueprint Software Systems. And for the last few years, Blueprint has been focused on really helping fill cracks and fill gaps and challenges that people have with their process automation tech stack. Right now, specifically, we have a solution that really goes around RPA migration. So if someone's on one robotic process automation tool and they want to move to another, we have a solution to help with that. And myself, I've been in the IT space for around 10, 15 years now. And I previously worked, I like to call myself tech adjacent. So yes, I have marketing in my title, but I did previously work as a solutions and product manager, where my whole role was exactly what we're talking about now, helping people find the right tool for the right problem.
That's great. All right. And last, and of course, not least, Dan.
Hi, Dan Parsons here, co-founder and chief platform officer at Thoughtful. At Thoughtful, we started this company to help mid-market businesses get access to a lot of the powerful automation technology that you typically find in the enterprise context. So we actually help companies who don't want to worry about a automation tech stack. So our model is automation as a service, which basically means you utilize automation from us like a utility. So, we work with you on figuring out what processes are most important from an automation perspective. And we actually go in and do fully managed automation deployment using your existing systems inside of your environment and give you a way that you can really just pay for the productivity that we deliver. So happy to be a part of the conversation today.
Oh, that's great. Well, look, to get us started, I think there's a lot of confusion in the industry about what a process automation tech stack is. If you talk to a guy leading a finance department, he'll say, "You mean RPA? I've got that." If you talk to somebody running a process improvement team, they'll say, "Oh, BPM, I've got that," right? But really, there's more to it than that. And I know that some of you may say, well, the answer to that is our product. But I kind of want to zoom out for the benefit of our audience today and really get each of you to define what is a process automation tech stack, and what are the ingredients that make a complete tech stack, right? And some of us may offer some of them, some of us may offer all of them, some of us may think we offer all of them, but I'm not trying to get to that yet. I'm just trying to get to what is it, right? What's in the cake that we're going to describe today? So Charlotte, if we could start with you.
Yes. So to me, a process automation tech stack is a set of digital tools, software that a company or a department implements in order to streamline, make things easier, automate, increase efficiency of processes and workflows in the objective of meeting business goals. So it can be a platform, it can be individual systems that work together. It's just something that's going to help you make your life easier, your team's life easier, and meet your business goals while doing so.
Well put. Okay, so let's move on to Connor here. Your definition.
Yeah, no, I think Charlotte did a great job there. I think part of the discussion that we probably could have is, is this a single thing? Is this multiple products that work together? I think the key components are, the ability to connect to different systems. A lot of this automation is going to involve going from one system to another. I think that there's an observability to this where you can actually see those automations that you're building. In the past, these would often be done in code on some, Amazon server somewhere. And I think one advantage that we have with these modern stacks is the ability to not only adapt quickly those processes that you're building, but also be able to visually see them so that they're accessible to a business user and not just to some developer that you have somewhere. So I think that those are a couple key components of it. And that's what I would build on top of what Charlotte said.
Bernd, love for you to weigh in on this.
What I find most important to understand, which helps me to think about it, is like I differentiate between what I call task automation and what I call process orchestration. So the part of I automate one thing that I need to do, and that could be in a standard software, it could be a SaaS service, it could be RPA, it could be an integration thingy, an API, whatever. So that does one thing, and then the orchestration bit, which basically says, no, I have to bring certain steps in a certain sequence, do some decisions on top of that. And you need kind of both for process automation, but you might need different tools for those different bits. And I find it most important to understand that you have both, and there are different things, and not to mesh it up like, hey, process automation is everything.
Yeah. Matthew.
Yeah, I would, in typical marketing fashion, I'll start by answering this question by not answering that question. So, I think the question I would ask first is what do you want to do? Right. So are you really looking for full workflow automation? Are you really looking for process automation? Are you looking to connect your systems, as Connor said earlier? So you really have to, before you get into software, because that's one of the problems that we have right now in the space of robotic process automation, where it came out, everyone was so excited, and it just turned into kind of a cowboy use case in the wild, wild west, where everyone's kind of doing their own thing in companies because people just they thought it was cool. They threw it out there without asking that question first. What is it I want to do here? Am I looking to save time? Am I looking to free up some other people to do some smarter tasks? Like, am I looking to develop a new part of my business? So you really got to ask that question first. And then to answer your question now, I would say it's kind of like your Batman utility belt, where it's when the problem is something that you feel like can be solved with automation, it's what you can pull out to solve that problem.
Excellent. Well, Dan, you probably figured out I'm coming to you next.
Yeah. Well, in the spirit of actually thinking about this as a technology stack, I think we can just follow the evolution of getting a process automated. So if we start at the top and we say, how do we identify and prioritize use cases? You're going to have tools that you would utilize to do that. Whether it's simple Word documentation or whether it's some sort of like Excel spreadsheet or something that simple. Then you get more into the process mining work. I know there's HighGear and some other Salonis, some other tools out there. And then you can get all the way down to actual implementation and the actual writing of the code. So you have your IDs like PyCharm, you have some of your technologies like Selenium, and at the end of the day, you got to store your code somewhere. So I think it really just like you look at where at in this workflow and journey that you are engaging in as the stakeholder. And I think that would uncover the toolkit you should be looking for.
Yeah, that's great feedback. I think one of the interesting things is this is not as cleanly defined as a marketing automation tech stack where somebody can come in and quickly analyze an organization for a list. There are getting to be some emerging leaders and areas where we would all agree that it's beneficial for companies to have things. But I like the general feel of the answers here, that it's up to the company to figure out what they're trying to do and to determine the right components. And I think that's really the issue about where we're going to drill in deep as well, right? I mean, we may be able to use a general purpose tool if our needs are general purpose, and we may need specialty tools if our needs drill deeper. So how, in your different models and in your experience, how have you seen companies decide what processes would benefit from automation, and what kind of questions do you think they should be asking to identify those processes? And I mean, that's from like, where am I going to find the gold, where I can actually solve efficiency problems, and where am I going to find the ROI? How do I find those processes? So let me just open that up free form here a little bit, and let's see what you guys are thinking about that.
Yeah, I can start off. I think one thing I would say is this is a thing where a lot of companies aren't doing that well. And we've seen this with RPA where they automated the wrong thing, and it causes a lot of problems down the road. I think with RPA, a lot of times people, they automate a process, they high-five themselves. They said, we just saved $100,000, and then they didn't realize all the maintenance costs that are going into it, or they didn't properly calculate the true cost of the licensing. So it's people necessarily aren't doing this correctly now, but to do it again, and just take back is that what do you want to do? And then what do we have available to automate it? So don't always think that it has to be RPA or it has to be low code. Maybe it could be even an app that you create. So that's why I like to think of it as a tool belt, because it's which utility do I have available to solve this problem?
Yeah, we usually, when we come in and help advise customers on how to do this, we usually, like, the easiest place to start is with something that has high volume. That tends to be where we look, which is either high volume as it's a lot of transactions, or it's taking, a long period of time. So a lot of volume of hours put into a single transaction. So we tend to look at those because that's a really easy place to point. And then you get out of the complex ROI models, and you can actually start breaking down, what value might be created with the automation. But if you're looking for a simple place to prioritize, look at things that tend to, either suck out a lot of volume as it relates to transactions or to people investing time.
I think the frequency is the one thing, and the standardization, I think it's also very obvious. But if it's not standardized, it probably doesn't make too much sense to automate, or at least then it's a different kind of automation where you probably just support users by doing things. One of the thoughts I wanted to add, which I find super important, I sometimes call that for myself pain-driven development. So you have to find something where there is a real pain to solve. So what I've seen a lot over the last years are programs, which I understand why you set up programs like the digitalization program, the whatever excellence program. They're important to some extent, also budget-wise, but I've seen grassroots initiatives much more successful. Yes, it can happen that you apply RPA for the wrong thing and might have a maintenance hell there, but still you need a problem to solve and a very concrete hands-on thing to do and see the value it gets and then grow it in the company. I find that much more important, actually, way to go about that.
I was actually gonna say the exact same thing. Is one of the things I do is look at pain points. Where are we having high volume, taking a lot of time, little value in terms of the tasks, and how can we make people's time bring more value doing something else? And usually that's where bottlenecks are happening, and if you're having issues trying to figure out where we can spend more time than industrializing a process and making it streamline a process is for me the best place to start. It doesn't necessarily have to be this huge process that's company wide and that's going to take months and months to analyze and things like that. It can be something as simple, again, I'm going to use my example, simple HR process, but that's taking a lot of time for my team members, and it's a pain point for employees because they're either not getting the answer they want in a quick way, or there's errors that are happening that can have a big impact and things like that. So to me, pain points is probably like the number one thing you can look at, and then high volume and the number of errors that can have an impact as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the costliness, if there are errors, is another good thing to point out, particularly if it's a particular process that has to do with compliance and the cost of getting something wrong is very high. That's another case where you could prioritize that, and also how liable a mistake in the process is if a human being is doing it is likely to cascade into other systems. That's where that pain can really add up, where if something on the HR side happens, now suddenly that pain is going to spread. It's not an encapsulated system. So I think that, along with the volume and the importance, is another thing to weigh when you're deciding where should I start? What's the most important thing that I could focus on?
What a great and professional group. You've all thrown in great content, and like nobody had to manage rules to keep you in the lane, right? It's great. So I heard some things that are worth summarizing here, that we're looking for transactional levels. We're looking for complexity. We're looking for pain. We're looking for opportunity. And I think I would add to that as well, that we also want to look for things where there's a high level of orchestration required by humans, right? Those things typically, if they're rules based, you can extract those humans out of that and put them back into higher value work. And so I think that's a great set of answers. One of the next things I want to look at a little bit, that I think a lot of people get blindsided by, and I want to talk about this two-sided. So don't worry, I'm not asking you guys to sort of reveal, hey, what are the things that somebody gets surprised by implementing your software? That's not my question. But what are some of the soft costs that can be hidden in process automation solutions that a wise person engaging in this effort should look at? And perhaps more saliently, the point that I'm trying to get to is, what are the soft costs of not having one? In other words, let's say an organization has just got, a favorite tool, right? I've got the hammer, everything looks like a nail, and I haven't really thought about that tool belt, to quote our friend Matthew here. And I haven't put anything in the tool belt but my one favorite tool from Big Brand X. And so what are some of the soft costs in implementing a stack like this? What are some of the soft costs in not having one?
I went first last time. I don't want to go first again. I'm trying to be polite here.
Hey, I can jump in. I think one thing that's an obvious one is just the license itself. So I think as you think about like where your cost structure starts to stack up, it's just like, if you are needing to incur a ton of different licenses just to maintain this toolkit, where actually the software itself isn't providing any utility, you still have to like do the implementations and manage and support it. I think you can actually look at what your licensing costs will be as like your first input to figuring out what utilization might need to look like.
I would say two things to look at in terms of soft costs that are upfront costs that you look at is adoption costs. So implementing a new, whether it's one software platform, a tool, whatever it is, if people aren't adopting it and we're spending all this extra time trying to get people on board and using it or whatever it is, that's going to be a cost in itself that you don't necessarily see on your spreadsheet or that the finance team is going to see. And then the second one, which circles back to what Dan just said, is the maintenance cost of whatever stack you have. The making sure it's updated, making sure that the licensing is there, and things like that. So that to me are the two main soft costs that I would see. And then the soft cost of not having something in place. To me, and again, I think this is my HR perspective, but it's any cost that is directly salary related. If somebody is spending all this extra time on doing something manually that can be automated, and you're spending your company's money on something that is not necessarily the right place. So anything that can be automized and is going to make that person work on something with higher value, you're putting your money where it should be, pretty much.
I think too, to add to that, I mean, there's also the risk of stagnation if you don't do these things. I mean, it's, talking about the hammer. I mean, companies like Blockbuster love their hammer and they thought their hammer was fantastic. And, there's a lot of other reasons there, but if you just think that the hammer is going to be all you need, then eventually, your competitor that also has a demolition hammer and, an impact driver, they're going to get ahead of you. And I think a lot of times with automation, we think of it too around helping your customers in customer support and customer success. And that can really hurt you. So if you kind of fall behind with supporting your customers on a support and success standpoint, that's going to hurt you on poor reviews, and that's going to cost you there, and that's going to cost you, with competitive deals as well.
Yeah, and I think one other opportunity for savings is if you start with what the process is, not what are the tools that I have, but what am I actually trying to accomplish? You might find that you have things in your stack that were there because you didn't have a better way to do them. And you might actually find that certain steps that you're taking, certain costs that you're incurring are no longer necessary in a world where that process is automated. And we've seen that with our customers a number of times where, by the time they have the automation set up, they said, hey, there was this whole additional step that we did, whether it's a piece of project management software or something else that basically bridge the gap that the automation can now do. There is an opportunity to kind of lean down a little bit and save some license costs with some of the various tools that you're using.
Nothing much to add, honestly. So we could probably talk for ages about the soft cost of not adding process automation. I mean, there are a lot of things to talk about. Like for probably the other part of the question about these one-stop shops and the big vendor toolings probably doing things, the one hammer, I don't believe in that too much, honestly. So when I see bigger organizations, they always have kind of a best of breed stack. It's unavoidable because they have a lot of people doing very different things, and they are also it's not possible to develop everything in like one tool, and you normally also don't get the people which are knowledgeable to do that in the amount you need. So I think it's simply not a model that's working nowadays anymore, and that's proven in most of the companies I know. So a lot of things are looking towards best of breed, and that means you have to puzzle together your stack depending on the requirements, what we said earlier on. And even Gartner recognized that in a way with their hyper automation stack and these kind of things. So yeah, nothing to add there.
Great. No, great. I think you did add something, actually. So I'm going to skip around a little bit here and move towards best practices. One of the things that I'd like to talk about a little bit, and really I'd like to hear you talk about a little bit, is best practices for implementing and testing these stacks. Because as you said, really, if you're going to do this well, you're probably going to have to bring a handful of solutions in and get them to play well together. So there's a few things, right? One is the tech piece of implementing and testing, but then there's kind of what we were already talking about. Charlotte brought up around adoption, right? So there's two sides to this. One is the tech testing and implementing, or implementing and testing, and then there's kind of the human side or the organizational side. And I'd really like to see or hear what you've seen be successful in terms of who should own driving requirements, driving change, driving adoption, and driving the continuous improvement once these kinds of platforms are in place. So two parts, like I said, the tech side of implementing and testing, and then the organizational side and who should own it.
Big question. I could go first. I was last time, so I can talk again. No, but a couple of thoughts. So just to describe a typical journey we see at our customers is basically they really start off with that one pain we discussed and start doing their first project, like with a POC, with a pilot, but also bringing it to production. I find that super important. Then you have a solution rolled out. And normally that's kind of the first step, which is super important, because then you have to something where you can run around, show and tell it, and basically not talk about theoretical ROE, but really show what you did, what pain you solved, what it brought the organization. And for us, at least, very often that's driven actually somewhere from the IT side, where they basically want to automate some kind of solution there. And then what we see is that if the adoption grows within the company, they start a couple of those solutions starting adding a center of excellence, basically helping others, and that's normally where it starts to get into, let's say, the C-level, at least of a CIO, very often on that radar to drive that more systematically. And then, I mean, that's probably in our nature. We are not so much on the business side, or not, at least not. It's super important to have the business side driving the requirements, the business requirements, but solution-wise, we're very much seeing that on the IT side.
I'll take the counter on that, actually. So what we see be successful is actually coming in with an acute business pain point. So typically, if what we've seen is when you try and centralize it, if it's too much of a heavy lift driven by IT, what you often find is there's a lot of upfront investment, and there's a ton of, again, making decisions based on the license and making decisions tech stack first. Whereas when we see the businesses are the ones actually driving it, we tend to find that we're going use case first. And therefore, what we're able to see is we go department by department, and we can actually prove the business value and use that to have a more decentralized adoption curve. And we see that be useful because, if you're talking to your counterpart over at HR, for example, and they've had a success, in automating a bunch of their HR processes in their HCM system, then that gets that perks the interest of finance, and then they say, hey, how can we do this for revenue cycle or collections or accounts payable? So we've tended that sort of adoption model will be very successful, and it actually IT typically isn't even involved until you get to the point where you need to get some sort of enterprise license agreement or something, a more broader type of contract involved.
Can I add one quick thought before I give it back to the group, just to put that into perspective? I think there is a big variety of different kind of products. So what we are looking at very often are core mission critical product processes, like in payments or tradings or order fulfillment. So these kind of really core things. And then there are other use cases where it might get much more on the business side, much less IT involvement. And I think it's important to keep that in mind. Also, again, what we said in the beginning, there's no one size fit all. So there are different types of products with a different level of IT involvement naturally. And I think that's important to also keep in mind.
And I think that's where Matthew was going before with the tool belt, right? Is that there are tools that are actually going to be easier for your business teams to adopt and implement, and there are tools that are going to be better when they're coming out of the IT center, right? And so it doesn't mean that it's one versus the other. It's you actually may need both, and it depends on the use case, right? So Matthew, Charlotte, Connor, I want you guys to weigh in if you want to on this topic, or we can move on. I'll give you a moment.
Yeah, I can weigh in quick because I agree with Dan where, like, obviously, the IT part of it's super important. But, if I'm looking to say if I'm going to implement, a robotic process automation at a company, for me, it's not successful unless someone like Charlotte fully buys into it and fully understands why we're doing this, because she needs to understand the benefit of it and be able to give the details that lead to that better process to the team. So that's super important. It's kind of like, when you bring your car to the mechanic, they're going to do a good job, if you have a good mechanic, but you still have to understand what they're doing. You have to understand the value of an oil change. You have to understand the value of putting your winter tires on and rotating your tires, or if you don't do it, you'll still have those problems.
Yeah, and I would just bring some lessons since I've been building software for 20 years. There's a reason that we use agile methodologies. You're thinking about where do I want to be at the end, but how do I deliver functional pieces along the way? And I think getting those early wins, not falling into analysis paralysis where you're like, well, how are all these things going to talk to each other 2 years from now? Because to be honest, like your business changes faster than that. You could have a 1.5 year long plan for some big automation project, and then COVID happens 4 months in. So it's keeping an eye toward the horizon. Where do we ultimately want to be? But then how can we start to get the organization to understand the value of it by delivering those discrete wins along the way? And I think that's how you build momentum. And ultimately you can get to that end point, but just do it in smaller pieces.
Connor, I actually just want to build on that real quick. I think that is actually one of the best practices that we've seen is that agile approach. Because like for a healthcare use case, for example, we might get the request, hey, let's automate all of revenue cycle. But like what we find is if we can say, hey, let's actually just start with primary claims and let's actually just automate for one single insurance provider, we can get that quick win up in a matter of, call it 60 days or less. And then you get a lot more traction versus going into that analysis phase where you might do documentation and modeling for 6 months and you haven't even really, recognized a penny of value.
We had a prospect. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Charlotte. Yeah, you first.
No, I was just going to say, I think it really depends on the type of process we're looking at. And I agree with Dan that it all comes down to, is this a use case driven by business that has a pain and that needs something and they're going to drive a lot of it? Or is it more of a sort of IT modernization type of thing where we're going to involve many different teams in the same process, and many different things need to happen where we need to have that IT team very involved that has a very good outlook on everything that's happening to make sure that everything is consistent and that makes sure that all the different systems are going to work together. I, as a business user, I don't care about the technical side. I don't care how it works, and I don't care how it's going to work in 2 years. I just want my pain to be met, and I want things to move forward, and I want to be more efficient. And what we've seen is that core processes, those really important processes for a company, if IT is not involved from the beginning, it's usually very difficult. For very high level business use cases, the IT team is less involved. So I think it really depends on the type of process we're looking at and the type of tech stack. Is it something that's very large or is it very specific? So I think I agree with both Bert and Dan on where we're looking at it from.
The peacemaker in the room. Great. Okay. Well, and I'd agree there's a bookend, right? I mean, you can look at bookends on this and say there are discrete processes that are going to live out at the edge of the organization. They may be very high value or high cost, but they're discrete. And then there's these core processes that are going to have to be deeply integrated on day one, and there can be zero mistakes. Where out here, maybe I can handle some evolution because right now I'm doing it with throwing paper airplanes and spitwads around the org. And over here today, I've got an old green screen transactional engine that never throws an error. It just doesn't go any faster no matter how much money I put into it, right? And so it's really looking at those two things and determining where you are on that spectrum is going to help you decide what kind of tool, what kind of implementation you're going to take. And I heard a lot of great advice in there in terms of who should own it, right? And it was from Burns' end, an example in the beginning of his discussion from IT really being very central and very critical in those mission critical core processes, to the business stakeholders being able to drive transformation much faster by being unleashed when you're getting into these discrete processes. And the great thing is, the little bit I know about all of your platforms is that you actually cover both, whether it's Camunda handling core processes, but being able to also come over and quite handily handle discrete processes, or discrete process tools where you've also got the capability, as Dan described, to go from department to department to department and build more traction as you go. That tells me that the customers that are looking at solutions like our space is providing have got a lot of good options. That means they've got to do some homework, right? So the thing is, before they even get around to trying to convince anybody of which solution out of the ones they've looked at they want to buy, they first got to try to convince their boss or their stakeholders that doing this is actually going to return an ROI, that there's going to be some value created out of that. And the challenge, both with a core process that isn't broken and with a discrete peripheral process that I can't measure how broken it is, there's a challenge for people. And I'd love to hear your ideas and best practices on this. How have you seen internal champions effectively articulate to their stakeholders the value they're going to be able to deliver by putting a stack or a solution in this space in?
I've seen companies treat it like, internal marketing. Like it's, they'll create good videos and these use cases and case studies and, of how it worked for this one department and share that. So I think that's, really making sure that people understand that, if it's, it's always, the champion's always the first thing, right? You find that one person in that one department that can benefit from it, you do it there. And then once that is working there, you just need to tell everybody else, and doing it through, like I said, those good stories and videos and things like that, like really does help. And then people hear and they go, oh, I want to do that too.
Yeah, and I think you need to be very clear and bold, not only in what the change is going to be, but that you can actually measure it. Anytime someone on my team says, hey, we're going to buy this new piece of software and it's going to save our server costs per customer by 30%, I'm like, well, can we actually measure that? And if the answer is not yes, then that's not something that I'm going to push forward. But besides just the dollars and cents and the numbers, like at our organization, we're extremely customer centric. It's in our DNA. We started as a services organization, and that's not necessarily a specific metric, but if I can tie the outcome of some of the automation to the customer, it's not just dollars and cents on a balance sheet, but it might be a better customer experience. It might be something that improves our brand. That's another way to punch through to that upper level and just say, hey, we have this shared value around our customers. And I really believe that this process automation is a way that we're going to improve that.
Probably two thoughts. The one is on the measurement side, we have a lot of capabilities in the tools already. So if you run like orchestration, for example, you get a lot of data out of that, how they run, where bottlenecks, and very often you can make great stories of what the improvement was after that was introduced. So we see a lot of examples actually. So like we said earlier on, do the first project, bring it in production, and then tell about that. So exactly what we already heard. The second thing, and I want to double down on that, again, the whole customer experience part, I think, is super important, and the whole agility part nowadays. So we've seen how much change might happen, which nobody really anticipates, and that can be about life and death for certain business models or probably in businesses. And this is not easy to put in numbers, but it's super important. And sometimes I find that even easier to argument. So for example, we're seeing that in a lot of banks around the world. They're looking at really the whole onboarding scenarios at the moment. Like, how do I get a new bank account, for example? How fast are we? Can that take 3 days? Competition can do that online. I get my number in like a minute without leaving the computer. These kind of things are very often drivers at the moment. And this is not so much about measurements, but it's super easy because competition is doing it. Customers are expecting it. We have to move.
Yeah, I think, and I think all the customer experience stuff I think is key. But if we're just anchoring to pure measurement and showing the pure economic value, what we like to do is help customers speak in the same language that the stakeholders are already used to speaking in. So for example, if they can anchor to some sort of cost point that is already a metric that they look at. So in healthcare, for example, like a cost per claim, then we help to orient the entire ROI story around that same metric. And then we help ensure that when the process automation is running, we are able to properly capture the telemetric data required to then close that loop. So for example, if you're paying $1 to process per claim right now as a healthcare organization, we can run out the model and we can say, hey, well, we actually can back into 20 cents per claim. So we try and really orient that business story around a language and a vernacular that the business is already using when they go to justify any sort of investment.
I'm going to jump a little bit here, and I'm curious again, because of the different purviews we've got here, what industries you see leading and lagging in this, and what the differences to their approaches are.
Silence, then, no, go.
We heard banking. I mean, banking and finance, I think, are ahead. I know telecom seems to be really far ahead. I mean, the largest thing I've ever seen, and I don't even know if there'll ever be anyone like that, is definitely telecom, the people that have the most automated processes. So I think they're doing really well. And I think lagging, I want to almost think just maybe like higher education, because there's definitely, I imagine, a lot of processes in there that can really benefit from being automated, but you just don't necessarily hear that too much.
I think any company that is highly regulated, that has a lot of constraints in terms of whether it's government regulations or things that make it that their processes have to be top notch and just they cannot not have something that is smooth. So as we already said, healthcare, banking systems, finance, and all those types of things that are going to necessitate having something very, very solid in terms of processes.
Yeah, and I would say amongst our customers, our e-commerce customers have a huge amount of automation that needs to happen. And it's partially that we just came off of Black Friday, which is always a very exciting time for our team when, the graphs are shooting off the chart. But when you think about the cost of something breaking down, someone forgetting to update a number, suddenly you're selling things that are out of stock. There's a huge cost to those folks for not having the processes in place to ensure that all those different systems, from your PIM to your fulfillment to the website, all need to be talking to each other very quickly, and not allowing human intervention to potentially embarrass somebody on their big day.
As I can tell you what we are seeing in the mid-market or mid-enterprise, I would call it, which is like the larger mid-market businesses. It tends to not even be industry specific, but we're actually seeing a department trend, which is automation being led by the finance department. So we are seeing a lot of our buyers be CFOs who are looking to, whether it's order to cash, whether it's revenue cycle, whether it's collections, account, AR, AP. We're seeing that there's a pretty big need and a lot of curiosity around figuring out how automation can help drive a more effective department.
I think that's pretty logical to me. All the processes that are very information centric, and that's in finance, that's in insurance, that's in telco. They're not moving like real stuff. They're just putting bits here and there. They're just easier also to automate. So they started early off, and I think that's why they are further advanced already.
Bernd, do you see that changing? Do you see the more traditional or heavy industries adopting these kinds of techs as well across time, or are you skeptical on that?
I'm still a bit skeptical, but I might be the wrong person to judge that, because I'm always a bit biased, and I see our customer base, and it's exactly what Matt said in the beginning. It's a lot of finance, insurance, telco, and then e-commerce, and then all the rest.
I got it. There's an old Chinese saying, the frog in the well can only see the sky above his hole, right? So we all live where we live. Any other thoughts on that?
I think in general that in our space, so we're in the composable space, meaning we're replacing these monolithic technologies, these large CMSs with companies that are assembling their own solution from best in breed. And this seems to be happening all over a lot of industries. And so we have a lot of very smart software people delivering very good solutions that are good at what they do, but no longer are going to solve the entire problem as a suite. And so I think the need for this automation is just going to increase. And it's one reason that we were inspired to work on this problem. But I think it's not just in kind of the CMS digital experience sector. It's going to be all over the place as some of these large monolithic, inflexible, non-agile solutions are being disrupted from smaller players. You need to figure out how to get them to all work together. So I think when we talked about, hey, as a champion, how do you get get this automation to be featured in your organization, it's just going to become a bigger and bigger problem. And so the sooner that you can start experimenting with it, getting some wins, and socializing it within your company, the more future-proof you'll be, as that's just the way the trend is going.
It's great responses, great input. They say the internet never forgets. So 1 year from now and 5 years from now, I'm committed to digging this recording up and tweeting out, or whatever's appropriate at that point, some measurement for all of us as to how correctly we got this or not. So we'll find out what our future readiness is, not by assessing it today, but by assessing it 1 year from now, 5 years from now. The question really is, how do you think process automation is going to change in the next 1 to 5 years? And what types of net new technologies do you think will be entering the space or even mixing into our own stacks as we move forward? So kind of where are we going 1 to 5 years, and what do you think we're going to see brand new in that time as well?
I think to ask that question, and this is probably closer to the 5-year mark, is also to ask how software itself is going to change. So I guess if I'm thinking purely on a prediction basis, especially, I'm sure you guys have seen some of the evolutions with GPT-3 and some of the artificial intelligence and large training models now having applications. But I predict that how humans are interfacing with software will change. So we might get a little further away from the current point-click user interface and move more towards another sort of interface, whether it's more language or conversation based. And then, from as automation professionals and automation tooling, we will then have to think about how to better orient automation downstream. So how do we interface with those new types of user interfaces and to still drive the outcomes that we want, but getting more away from the point-click RPA style of automation and figuring out how we piggyback on some of the more modern technologies, like we're seeing with some of the AI stuff.
Yeah, I second the AI for sure. We have a data science team that is thinking through these things every day, in terms of, you can automate what you should be automating, but you aren't necessarily thinking about what you don't know you should be automating. And that's what things like neural networks and large data sets are really good at doing for you. And so I'm always on Midjourney and GTP and all this stuff. And I just see that happening very quickly, and will be really interesting space to watch.
Probably adding a different perspective. So I kind of agree with Dan. I think we have to look at it from a broader perspective. And what I said, I'm looking very much in the software engineering field, and the way we engineer software changes as well a lot, actually, with the whole, we get everything in the cloud, SaaS stuff, how we do builds is changing, everything around GitHub and stuff. So the way we develop software changes very much, and also the roles involved change very much. So and I think that all leads to a different way of developing software on the one hand, and on the second hand, also the kind of, like we say today, hey, is it business, is it IT? These lines will get more and more blurry over time. So it's not that easy in 5 years from now to say this is business or IT, because at least I hope that this gets much more intervened. And that also will change the way, again, how we do things a lot. So I think that will be big changes. How they exactly look, let's see, in a way.
Yeah, I'm not going to weigh in on the technical side, obviously. But one thing that's for sure, and it kind of goes with the previous question of what companies or what industries are lagging, is that this is not something that companies are going to be able to not do in the future, and in the very short-term future. So that's something that we're going to see, I think, more and more companies and industries realizing how important it is to invest, whether it's time or money, into these types of tools, platforms, whatever it is. It's not something that we're going to be able to do without. And in terms of being a business user, we're looking for flexibility. We're looking for meeting our business needs, our business requirements, and just making sure that the technical side is not favored compared to what the business users need. So working hand in hand between the IT teams and the business users, as Bernd just said, the lines are going to get blurry. And that's something that we're going to have to work on, is how to really integrate the two types of personas in the future.
And probably related to what we discussed early on, it might even get more complicated to understand which solution to apply for which kind of problem. Maybe it'll also get easier, but I think it gets harder. It's like you said, you have to do your homework to understand the tooling landscape.
I appreciated Dan's input. Forgive me for interrupting you there, but I appreciated Dan's input on the way people are going to interact with software changed. I sort of pictured somebody hopping on the elevator there at BonitaSoft and talking to themselves in the air and saying, "Who am I supposed to work on getting onboarded next for Charlotte?" Right? And I think it's really interesting you brought that perspective in, because I think there's so much changing, and we tend to think about the tech itself. But you're right, the way people are going to interact with technology may be a much more significant part of the change, even than the way the technology itself changes. Matthew, you wanted to jump in there, please.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, one thing I hope that we see in the next 5 to 10 years is really an answer to this promise of citizen development. So I would love to see where, somebody like the non-technical folks like Charlotte and myself can really do some of these process automations without the benefit of the IT team, and just do things faster. Because I think that's something some companies have done successfully, but we haven't seen it at the wide scale approach that we thought we would have seen by now. So I really hope that that's something that changes, and there's more tools out there to enable that.
Matthew, you're baiting me. That's where we live, is in trying to get that done. But it's one of those things too, where I think there's a change in the industry, in that we're going from a lot of platforms that are just app factories to a lot of solutions that are beginning to bring a lot of depth towards particular problem sets. And Connor's kind of talked about that with blends of best breeds. You're seeing customers begin to expect, the market begin to expect, and more vendors begin to deliver solutions that say, we're not going to try to solve everything in the world, but in this space, we're going to get you 85% of it, and you're going to be able to configure the end. More and more of the things that we know everybody needs, or everybody is going to choose, or that you can't do without in that highly regulated industry, are going to be built into the application. And so I think that's really great insight. I know that we're going to end up getting the ghost of Christmas past is going to join us in a minute and let us know that we're almost wrapping up. But as Jonathan comes in, I just wanted to say, look, some of us are quasi-competitors, that we may be in the same space. Our Venn diagram overlaps a little bit. But I know it's also such a bountiful space. There's so much opportunity out there that we probably don't run into each other a lot. And it was really terrific to be able to spend a little bit of time with the rest of you today and to hear your thinking. And I just wanted to tell you what was interesting, and I imagine you all got the same thing out of this, that it seems like in varying flavors, we're all trying to solve the same problem, which is that we see that there's a need to go faster, to be able to solve process problems in a more effective and efficient way. And that ranges from whether it's being driven by the business or driven in IT. And I think I'm excited to hear and see that the market it really has a lot of great options emerging. Just like Matthew said earlier, it's early. Right, or maybe it was Connor, I forget. But we're in the early stage of it. We're still seeing it grow. In fact, I'm sorry, I'm crossing wires with a presentation I was on earlier today. But we're still early enough that the market is changing and growing, and it's great to have spent a little bit of time today with some of the other leaders in that market. Thanks so much for your time and great input.
Thank you for your moderating. I think this was a fantastic panel. I appreciate everybody's insight and thoughts on everything for the last 54 minutes or so. Unfortunately, our topic's coming to a close. So with the few minutes we have left, I'd like to invite each of you to take 30 seconds or so for self-promotion. Vaughn, you moderated, so we'll let you go last. Charlotte, let's start with you.
Yeah, so I'm actually really happy I got to participate, and I was a little bit I don't know if afraid is the good term, but when I saw everybody on the panel, I thought, wow, I'm not technical at all, but I think I did a pretty good job, so I'm happy. But in any case, BonitaSoft is a BPM process-based platform based on open source. It's highly extensible, and it really works with whatever stack you have, and it's mainly for automation projects and mission-critical processes. So come check us out.
All right, I'll jump in next. So I'd encourage you to check out Content Stack. So we help companies that are struggling with their digital experiences, the agility of their marketing, transform from these old monolithic technologies to much more of a best-in-breed approach, being able to stitch all of these platforms together and get much better outcomes for your customer. And we were super excited to participate in this conversation and also talk about our Automation Hub product, which we really feel changes the game for being able to use that best-in-breed strategy. So if you're looking for digital transformation, looking to up-level your digital experiences, we'd love to have a chat with you.
Thank you very much. Bernd.
Yeah, so we're looking at the process orchestration category very much with our tooling. So I really believe that the broken end-to-end orchestration leads to a lack of understanding your process. You might have automated some bits and pieces, but not the overall orchestration. If you don't understand it, you can change it. You cannot change it. You lose flexibility. So our claim is to fix process automation. You need process orchestration, and that's where we are best. So I can just encourage everybody to try it out. So go to camunda.com. There's a SaaS free trial version, easy, quick starts, recordings, a lot of customers talking and stuff. See you there.
Thank you. Great. Matthew.
Yeah, and if there's a way to make sure that my CEO never sees this, that'd be great, because I'm not going to necessarily plug our product, but I want to talk about a podcast that we launched recently. It's called Automation Untangled. And I always think there's room to learn about this, and things like, this panel we did today and what solution reviews I'm putting on is really great. And if, it's the way we learn now is we like to listen to things while we're working and have things on. So this podcast, Automation Untangled, that we put together, it's me talking to someone who's doing a good job at process automation and them telling us what they're doing and how they're doing it well and what problems that they're overcoming and how they're overcoming it. So you can find it on Spotify, Automation Untangled, or on Blueprint Software Systems website as well.
Excellent. Thank you. And Dan.
Yeah, I'd encourage anyone to check out Thoughtful. Thoughtful.ai is our website. And we help companies who necessarily don't want to answer all these questions about tech stack, or they don't know where to start. So, we provide automation as a service, which basically means, we do everything from the design, implementation, and ongoing monitoring and support of, any flavor of automation across your existing software stack. So I'd encourage you all to check it out. Happy to have conversations with anyone.
Sounds good. And Vaughn, let you have the last word.
Well, you bet. Similar to Bernd, we work on process orchestration needs for mid-market to enterprise customers. The primary difference, though, is who we enable to do that. We're primarily focused on business users and business analysts. While we do have IT partners in some of our larger organizations or in the larger deployments as they grow, we often start out in teams of 50 to a few hundred people with a particular burning platform. And we're very good at not violating an enterprise's expectations in security and the ability to delegate down the administration of the system into slices that meet the needs of the organization. And like the other folks who said, we would just be thrilled to talk to anybody who's in the space and interested. We're easy to find at highgear.com. I'm pretty easy to find on LinkedIn, and so is the company. Always welcome to connecting to other professionals in the industry. And again, great to be in a room full of such bright people who brought a really diverse group of perspectives here, from the business stakeholder to the marketing person who's been a product manager to the heavy tech guys. It's been great. Thank you so much.
And thank you for moderating. It has been a great panel and a great day. That will unfortunately wrap up the work tech section of Inside Jam, but we're at it all again tomorrow as we take a look at business intelligence with 5 hours of back-to-back panels. Everything kicks off tomorrow at 11 a.m. Eastern with cloud data architectures best practices. Once again, for Solutions Review, my name is Jonathan Paula. Thank you for joining us. Have a great afternoon. We hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.